Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jamcracker Live webcast, How IT Service Providers Can Cloud Enable Large Enterprises. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to bring to your attention. In the panel to your right, you are able to ask questions, and we encourage you to do so. If we have time throughout the presentation, we should be able to answer those questions. As part of this presentation, there will be a live demo of Jamcracker's solution, putting the theory into practice. This webcast is part of our monthly series. Today we have Steve Crawford, Vice President at Jamcracker, and Bob Beliveau as your presenters. So let's get started, gentlemen.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, and thank you again for joining us for this webinar. Before we get into the details of the subject, just wanted to do a quick introduction for those of you that may not be that familiar with Jamcracker. You know, the higher order bit here is that we enable cloud business models. We do it for enterprise IT organizations. We do it for service providers, and examples of some of our customers are shown there at the bottom. But essentially what we provide is a platform that enables our customers to unify how they manage and deliver hybrid clouds across the entire life cycle and across the entire spectrum, from infrastructure services to application services to mobile, et cetera. And we've been in business since 1999, which was when we were founded. This has been our core focus since our founding. And so we very much have been spearheading this industry, what is commonly referred to as the cloud services brokerage market today. So what we're talking about in this webinar is what the opportunity is for service providers to help cloud enable their enterprise IT customers. And before we kind of get into how you do that, I'd like to first start with kind of what is the situation assessment. What are the issues that the enterprise IT organizations are facing? And then we'll kind of get into how our service providers are well positioned to help them with those challenges. So, you know, lots of statistics out there regarding, you know, cloud adoption, cloud growth. This is just, you know, one of many. But I like the fact that it, you know, cloud is kind of an amorphous term. I like how they broke it out between different segments of cloud services, ranging from platform as a service, software as a service, and infrastructure as a service. And, you know, it's funny, in an enterprise IT context, usually most of the discussion with an IT organization around cloud services historically has been around infrastructure as a service. But if you look at the overall enterprise cloud adoption, infrastructure services is a very important and very fast-growing element, but by far the largest chunk of that cloud adoption and forecasted to remain that case is software as a service. Now, the reason why, you know, you may not hear as much, although this is very much changing, and we'll talk about why, about software as a service from, you know, when you're having those IT organization discussions is for the most part, software as a service adoption within companies has been driven by the business units. It's been driven by functional departments. It's been driven by individual users. It's been driven by lines of businesses. And essentially what has happened is, you know, it's called various things, the consumerization of IT, shadow IT, but essentially the barriers to entry for individual users or groups of people to adopt an application service, you know, offered via the cloud, has really, you know, gone down. The cost of barriers in terms of, you know, not having huge upfront licensing costs, not having to pay people to do a lot of operation setup and integration, et cetera. And so that's why you have mass adoption historically of services like Salesforce.com that initially happened at the grassroots level within sales organizations. It happens with Box, it happens with Dropbox, it happens with all kinds of different software as a service solutions. Whereas infrastructure as a service, for the most part, has been driven more by the technical side of the organization. So, developers that are working closely with IT or working within the IT department, it's been more of a centralized. There's certainly been adoption in terms of individual users going out and signing up for Amazon, but it's been more on IT's radar. It's been something that's been more understandable, if you will, by IT organizations, and especially a lot of interest in private cloud is essentially focused on private infrastructure as a service, leveraging experience in VMware and other types of virtualization technology. So it's been kind of a evolutionary approach versus a revolutionary approach. But the thing is that increasingly now enterprise IT organizations are wanting to deal with the SaaS adoption, because one of the key things that IT organizations are responsible for historically has been governance. It's been protecting the overall organization and from a governance, risks, and compliance standpoint. So what does that mean? That means ensuring that the organization can pass its next Sarbanes-Oxley audit. It means being able to show that you're HIPAA compliant. It means if you have operations in the European Union, it means showing that you are not disclosing personally identifiable information of EU citizens. And it means a lot of things depending on what geography you're in, what market you're selling into, and what kind of organization and regulatory environment you have. So, so the cat's out of the bag. This whole notion of SaaS adoption and shadow IT is coming out of the shadows, and it's now forefront and center in terms of the minds of IT organizations who are now looking at how do I provide a single point of hybrid cloud management, hybrid services management for all of these different services that are being consumed throughout the organization, regardless of whether it's public providers, private providers, regardless of whether it's software as a service or infrastructure as a service. And so the key drivers for hybrid IT is really, for the most part shown here, the obvious things. I want to increase IT operations, agility, and flexibility. So therefore, I want to be able to pick and choose different cloud providers. I want to be able to spin up, spin down, services on demand. So, to a great extent, I want to adopt that cloud business model for how I deliver IT services within my organization, and apply that not only to pure play cloud services that I'm sourcing or providing, but also for my legacy IT services as well. Now, the key driver for why this is becoming forefront and center in IT organizations' minds is that they, because of the situation we discussed, they are being forced, and we are all going more into a multi-vendor sourcing, usage, and support world. It used to be in your typical enterprise IT organization, you could count the number of major IT vendors, on one hand. It would be IBM for some places were IBM shops, some were HP shops. Everybody had Microsoft for certain things. Now, if you look at the number of application and infrastructure services, because of those low barriers to adoption, it has greatly grown. And because you're seeing more of a specialist model, right, where you've got, take Salesforce.com, right? They are, they have established themselves, positioned themselves as, the go-to place for CRM. And yeah, they roll out kind of auxiliary services around that and all that, but they're not trying to be your email provider. They're not trying to be, your web conferencing provider, right? They are focused on CRM. And you've got a lot of other, cloud organizations like that. So now, it's more of IT organizations are starting to view these different providers as specialists. So I want to get the best provider, get the best bang for the buck, and that's why I want to go with these guys, right? So as a result, you're seeing much more in terms of multi-vendor sourcing. And then, of course, this has been going on for a long time, but for IT organizations, they're always being mandated to do more with less. And, so again, that's another reason why this hybrid IT and cloud business model adoption is going on. Now, it's not to say that there aren't some big challenges, and some of those key challenges are shown here. But we can kind of break it down into 4 different buckets. So you look at some of the key challenges, and this is based on different surveys that are out there and things like that. Number one, a very common concern that's raised about enterprise cloud adoption, by CIOs or senior IT executives historically when they've been surveyed is, gosh, if we use an external cloud provider, we don't really have control over the data, the security of the data, and what if they're hacked and we lose our customer data? That's why we don't want to outsource this. We want to keep all these applications and infrastructure services in our data center. That was kind of like the historic knee-jerk reaction, but it's an understandable reaction, but it's also not really a viable argument for not doing cloud adoption. And let me draw an analogy, right? These same organizations where IT folks may have said, hey, there's security risks with outsourcing your data, they don't blink their eye at accepting the fact that all of the funds, all the monetary assets of that organization, are being deposited in banks, various banks, right? Banks are service providers. You always hear that data is money. Well, where are these companies putting their money? They're actually putting them in service providers, right? Third-party providers. They're not building their own safes and putting those safes in their own data centers. They're not even talking about that. It'd be ludicrous. The CEO is not digging a hole in his backyard and burying, his company's money in there. He's not putting it under his mattress. So really, if data is money, then we should think about data security in much the same model as we think of how we secure, money in the banking system today. And yes, your money is more likely to get robbed in a bank than it is if you dig a hole in your backyard and bury it. But you get a lot of convenience and other, things that go along with that. So everybody uses banks. But so if you start thinking about, well, what are the solutions? How do you address these sorts of issues, right? Because compliance and security is kind of a big term. This really falls under the bucket of providing solutions that allow the IT organization to manage how they govern, to manage how they take on risk, and how they enforce policies and compliance across their users, across all the different services those users have access to, and be able to have auditable proof that they are, verifying with when they have their next, with those regulations, when they have their next Sarbanes-Oxley audit, when they have their next HIPAA audit. So we'll talk more about this, but this is one of the key ways that enterprises can address, some of these adoption challenges. Next thing is cost and price. Now, of course, we've always heard, and it's always been touted that, cloud computing is a cheap and easy way to get access to resources that you couldn't possibly, build yourself, or it would take a huge amount of money. And that's well and good. The problem is there's, the experience is that if you don't manage it very well, cloud computing can be extremely expensive, right? And over a long term, it might be hard to say that this is cheaper than having a closely held asset that you're managing. And so the reason for that is a lot of times there isn't the visibility in terms of what are all the different cloud computing resources that are being used throughout an organization, who are the different users, how do you know that, this instance that was spun up by that user on Amazon or on Azure, it still needs to be running. So, how do you validate all this stuff? And so we see these articles that, we see these nice headlines like, company gets, huge bill from Amazon, CFO freaks out, those sorts of things. So spend management is a very, big thing, and we'll talk about how that can be done as well. Compatibility with current IT infrastructure. This is where, catch-all term for how you address this is really falls under the operations management bailiwick. So, how do you tie this in with your current directory structure? If you're using Active Directory as an example, to define policies in terms of, which user groups get access to which resources. How do you extend that to the cloud so that you can also govern, what cloud services each of those groups get as well? How do you tie this in with your, existing help desk? Maybe you're using VMC Remedy for your current internal support desk. How do you provide, if you're going to take on the role as an IT organization of being an aggregator and a cloud provider, you want to be able to, provide aggregated support for your users as well. How do you tie that into your current infrastructure? And infrastructure is not just technology; it's also your existing processes. It's how you get things done. But finally, and actually, this is actually the #1 cloud adoption challenge, according to some recent enterprise IT surveys, is, listen, there's essentially saying, listen, we lack the resources and the expertise. We know we need to, implement some kind of governance, risk, and compliance management solution so that we don't take on too much risk in terms of our organization. We know that we need to do a better job of monitoring how cloud usage is being used so that we can optimize the spend management. We know that we can't just sort of, tack this on to our current process. We know that it takes, re-engineering how we get things done within our organization in order to make us more flexible and agile and all that good stuff. But where do we start? Where do we get the expertise to help to do this? Where can we find partners that can help us do this? And thus, this is what we think is a fantastic opportunity for service providers that, that historically have engaged with enterprise IT clients over the past. So let's get a little bit into the technology piece. I'm not going to go too deep on this because we could spend a lot of time. I could spend a lot of time, and we could spend a lot more time on the demo side going through this. But I'm just going to kind of do a high brush overview of kind of the different solutions that we provide, and then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about how our platform works. But essentially, what the Jamcracker platform does is it provides solutions that address these three of these four big issues that we've talked about: governance, risk, compliance management, spend management, and operations management. And so I won't go through all of this in detail, but just to give you a sense of some of the, how does this technology, how does our platform enable you to address, some of these different issues? Well, catalog management. So having a central repository where IT can define all of the accepted services that can be provisioned, requested by, users throughout the organization. And by providing that, by putting those services in the catalog, they're saying that they fall under IT's jurisdiction in terms of providing governance oversight for those services. So, it's just simply IT managing a central catalog is a way of doing that. One of the big issues with governance and policy is that sometimes users don't know what the governance policies are, right? So catalog is a way of communicating these are the accepted services. But you also have to provide a feedback and input mechanism where if there are services that are not in there, that the users can, make a request through your help desk or whatever for, those additional services. Single sign-on, just kind of picking another example off here, is a way of, driving consistent, uniform password enforcement policy across lots of different services that users have access to. So rather than saying, hey, Mr. User, you have, here's your credentials for Salesforce, your credentials for Office 365, your credentials for, Box, your credentials for WebEx, et cetera. They just have a single set of credentials, or even better, the fact that they are logged into their network, through Active Directory, also logs them into this Cloud Broker platform that then enables them to have single sign-on access to all of their different services that they've been provisioned to. So it's a fantastic convenience for the end users. It essentially eliminates one of the traditionally highest cost support desk items, which is resetting lost passwords, and it's much more secure, right? Because you're not people aren't writing sticky notes with all their different credentials, or even worse, using the same set of credentials for for different services. But that same example, single sign-on, right, can also provide a means for doing more effective spend management, right? So let's say you've got, you're a large company, you've got 200 people in your sales force, and you're about to hire 20 more, and you've standardized on Salesforce for your CRM. You've bought a license that essentially gives you 200 seats. You've got 20 more employees, sales employees are about to join. You've got to figure out, do I need to order another bulk of seats from Salesforce, or can I, let me look into my usage logs here from the platform and see if I've got any underutilized Salesforce licenses. So you could run a report, for example, if you're using the Jamcracker platform, or either directly or through a service provider such as yourselves, and run a report. Maybe it shows, hey, I've got 25 users that haven't logged in to Salesforce over the past 2 months. Hey, maybe I'll check the sales manager and see if I can reuse, reallocate those seats to these 20 new employees that I've got coming in. Just one example. Or when we were talking about, that's an example of doing spend management, license management for a subscription-based service. If you're using an infrastructure as a service type of offering, in addition to that, for your developers, whatever the case may be, generally the billing model on that is going to be usage-based, and it's going to be real-time. It's going to accumulate in real time. So you've got to have the real-time hooks into Amazon Web Services, into Microsoft Azure, into your VMware environment, so that minute by minute or day by day or whatever the case may be, you can run a report showing, okay, here are the different spend by different departments for these various, infrastructure resources. And then also, operations management, there are a ton of different touch points there, but essentially this is all about how can the organization take this cloud business model and use that to make themselves more efficient, more flexible in terms of how they deliver services throughout their organization. So now a big piece of this, cloud isn't, the whole idea behind hybrid IT is that cloud is not going to do wholesale replacement of every IT asset that companies have. It's certainly not going to happen in the near future, and probably won't happen ever. There's always going to be things that are going to be running on site, right? And so the reality is, as you bring in new cloud services, you may want to integrate it with your existing, some of the existing assets. I'll give you an example. Let's say that company that has Salesforce.com for their also is running Oracle for their financials, and that's an on-prem solution. Let's say, they want to decide that they want to build a quote-to-collect type of offering. That means they've got to have integration between Salesforce, the Oracle financials, and with their existing processes. That's just one of many examples. And so that type of integration expertise, that type of tie-in to the day in and day out processes of an IT organization are very important considerations as well. So Jamcracker, we provide a platform, we call it the Cloud Service Broker Enablement Platform, that allows enterprise IT organizations and service providers who are providing these services for their enterprise IT customers to be able to provide these different solution sets. Real quickly, this is a very high-level architectural diagram. From this, you can kind of see some of the major elements of this. I've mentioned catalog management. I've talked a little bit about service and user provisioning. We provide tools and toolkits for enabling organizations to onboard cloud services. We've already pre-integrated with lots of others. And so being able to automate user provisioning is a key aspect of what our platform does. Authentication, authorization, access control, Single sign-on fits in here, roles-based access control fits in here. Essentially anything having to do with defining policies around who can have access to what. Having a single point of user administration. So an employee quits the company, you delete that user from, let's say, your Active Directory. You want that to trigger a rule within the platform that says, okay, I'm going to deprovision that user from all the different cloud services that they were provisioned to. So you can do it that way instead of having to have somebody log in to each of the cloud services that user had been provisioned to, if you know, and deprovision them from within there. Reporting and auditing, that's important from a spend management standpoint. It's important from a compliance standpoint. It's important from an operational KPI standpoint. Being able to support different pricing models, whether it's subscription-based, usage-based, and being able to tie this into your existing help desk system or processes so that you can provide, as an IT group, you can provide a single point of support for your end users. So that's all around kind of the services delivery side of the equation. I think of this as almost kind of like a cloud supply chain management. You have the demand management side of it, and then you have the supply chain management side of it, and that's sort of what's shown here with the services management layer below. So this is all about how do you automate orchestration across, hybrid cloud resources, things like how do I spin up, if a user requests an application that's running in a virtualized container on Amazon or VMware, you want to provide them the choice, how do you spin that up on demand? How do you orchestrate that? How do you monitor the usage at different levels from a cost standpoint in terms of your infrastructure services, and from a chargeback standpoint in terms of use of the application running on top of those infrastructure services. Usage analytics, so you can, kind of morph and improve your catalog of services as time goes on. Automating deployments, so on and on and on and on. So, again, we've been doing this since our founding in 1999, so that gives us about 16 years of having really thought through this from a rigorous standpoint and having a lot of firsthand experience in helping organizations do this, and that's one of our great values. But we can't provide it all, right? So if you think back when it was talking about the enterprise challenges, we've talked about three of them, which was governance, spend management, and then operations, integration, things like that. But the fourth one, and I said at that point, it's the number one obstacle that enterprises are facing in terms of cloud adoption is that they lack the resources, they lack the expertise. And that's where we think the opportunity for service providers, system integrators to offer these services and to wrap around their professional services is a fantastic opportunity, and probably will be the greatest opportunity to expand your business that you've seen in the past decade. So to give you a sense of what that might be, we provide this technology platform in the middle here, and I've just talked about it, and all that can be customized, and all can be branded under your brand. It can be branded under each of your customers. It's multi-tenant, multi-tiered. I'll talk a little bit about touch points, directory servers, support desks, things like that. And I've talked a little bit about how, providing the flexibility for your customers to be able to pick from maybe a catalog of services that you provide, your own core services plus those that you aggregate from your partners. But they're also going to want to onboard their own services that they have their own contractual relationships with. And so they're going to need some initial hand-holding with that. So again, we think it's a fantastic opportunity for, service providers. And later on, I'll talk about some case studies that are specific to service providers. In fact, I'll do that right after Bob's demo. But let me first start with an end user example of what their issues were, what was the solution they implemented, and what's the approach that they've taken. So this example of an end user organization, this is a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing business. I can't state their name, but they provide they provide parts for 80% of the automobiles that are sold around the world. So they have a global reach. They have global relationships. Any company that's manufacturing a car has content from this provider. And, so they, understandably, they have, offices, manufacturing facilities in lots of different countries around the world. And not only do they sell components for new cars, they also, a good part of their business, probably about a third of their business, is also selling aftermarket parts. So they sell a lot of parts under various brands for various uses through retail auto parts stores. And I'm sure all of you are customers of theirs. So their issue was that they had, they were seeing, the IT department had done an internal survey, and they were seeing a lot of quote-unquote shadow IT adoption by the different business units. And the CIO was concerned about this cloud sprawl, causing governance issues. He was one of these guys who said, we've got to figure this out, right? We can't bury our head in the sand. We can't ignore it. We, the IT department, are responsible for governance and ensuring, regulatory compliance on behalf of our organization. So we've got to figure out how to do this. They also saw that they had an opportunity to provide value to the lines of businesses in terms of, the IT organization had a lot of expertise, like most do, in terms of having professional negotiators deal with vendors who can, negotiate the best prices, but also be able to aggregate demand across all the different business units within the organization. So they went out and started talking to the different lines of businesses. There was no contention among them. They wanted IT to do this, right? For example, no VP of marketing, wants to take on the risk within this organization of ensuring regulatory compliance or risk of data breach, right? So they're very happy to hand over that responsibility to the IT organization, as long as it doesn't slow them down, right? So that was kind of the arrangement that was worked out, and it's a very important thing to address, right? And then the phased approach is shown here. Initially, phase one, they focused on governance. So they, implemented the Jamcracker platform. They're using this as in a cloud fashion, so they're using it through a cloud provider. And first thing was get all these different SaaS applications into the catalog. And it doesn't mean just publish the catalog. It means put them through a governance process, have a cloud governance board that reviews it, make sure that these are good services, and also kind of consolidate demand. So instead of having 4 different document sharing solutions, try to standardize on 2 of them. Once they completed that phase, they then started adding in the infrastructure services. So Amazon, Azure, their big Microsoft shop. They also have made a huge investment in VMware historically. So onboarding all of those to improve the flexibility in terms of how they roll out new applications. And then phase 3, which they're just about to embark on, is being able to delegate governance administration to the different regions, because different regions have different governance needs. So again, I'm going to show a couple of case studies relating to service providers who are providing this function. But before I do that, I'd like to turn it over to Bob to give you a very quick demonstration of our platform. So Tony, if you could transfer control.
Looks like I've got it.
Good.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Steve. And so the platform has a whole bunch of functionality in it. I have a few minutes here to show you some of the key aspects related to what Steve has been talking about. I'm going to focus in on 2 areas, really. First, I'm going to talk about, looking at this slide here. This is the only slide I have. You have the platform here, where the service provider will be running and creating stores and creating portals and services. And then you have the different markets they can serve, and in each of these markets, maybe different sets of catalogs, different policies, and different portals in each of them. So I'm going to take a look at one of the enterprise portals. You can think of it as that large auto parts manufacturer, the auto supplier, and what they would be seeing. I'm going to start with that, and then later I'm going to go back and look at what you, the service provider, would be seeing more in the back end to run the business. Okay? So first off, I've logged into this this enterprise portal, and our platform has a lot of roles, role-based access control. I've signed in as an admin, so I can show you all the functionality that's interesting. Now, first screen here I have is the catalog. In this catalog screen here, you'll see I have 10 services. But you can imagine a large enterprise maybe having, dozens and dozens. And maybe some of those are applicable to some users and some to others. The salespeople in that company are going to need certain apps, while maybe engineering and other teams are going to need different sets of apps. So you want to have a catalog that is able to, categorize things, you're able to find things quickly, but also be able to segment the catalog and only show salespeople what salespeople should be seeing. That goes to some of the policy management that Steve was talking about, and the platform offers that capability. So I have here these 10 services as the user that I am, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll pick one here, maybe this database as a service. I'm going to run through a self-service scenario, so you can see that enterprise, the users that are, taking advantage of it are going to be able to come in and just order their own services. Now, they do want additional governance over that. There's budgeting, there's workflow approvals, and you'll see some of that coming through here. But you'll also see here, just quite quickly as I go through and order this item, that I'm able to go and just pick the item out of the catalog and purchase it, right? I'll maybe specify a budget code, just to make sure that this is being applied to the right budget. In this case, we just have a small set of budgets here that I can pick from. They're based on certain time frames, etc. I can then, after picking that budget, I'll go ahead and click proceed to go and finish purchasing that. I can see what the fees are going to be charged back. I can see when it's going to be activated. So this is a quick self-service method for users to be able to go and get something like a database as a service. But it could be any service, software service like Salesforce or virtual machine instances. Maybe there are WordPress templates that you have out there that you want to publish out to the users. Those are all different things that can be offered through the platform. Even some of the enterprise's own services as well that aren't even cloud services. Okay, so looking at this receipt here, I'm going to go through, as I showed you, we had the budget that I had to specify, but now we have the request to be approved, right? So oftentimes you'll want to have the enterprise will want to have some sort of budget approval or order approval, be it the manager of that person. It could be a single person who's responsible for approving everything. Want to get some information about the order, what budget it's going against. They can either approve or reject it accordingly, okay? And so being able to inject a workflow here, whether it's just a single step like I have here or maybe going through tiers, having that workflow capability is important to those enterprises, giving them a little bit more control in the governance realm around what's being ordered, okay? Now, after going and ordering that service, I'll need to be using it, right? And as you can see here in this dashboard, we have what we call our dashboard panes when you can single sign on into some of these services. For example, Salesforce, right? So you just go down here and click on launch. So right from our platform, you can see I'm logging into Salesforce. I didn't have to remember my Salesforce credentials. It's not something I wrote down on a sticky note, or maybe I'm not using the same password across all those sites. Some of those risks that Steve had mentioned. I'm able to single sign on in right from our platform. Now, sometimes this isn't the model that enterprises will want. Maybe they'll want users, once they've authenticated into Active Directory, they'll want the users to be able to then automatically come right to Salesforce, maybe go to the Salesforce bookmark. And using various SSO mechanisms, our platform is very flexible and supports this, they'll be able to go and do that, and when they go to try to log into Salesforce, it will know that it's part of the SSO scheme, and will be able to pass through the request using SAML 2.0 and chaining, so that our platform will know that the user has gone and accessed it. That will give the people later visibility into what the users have been doing when they have been logging into the services, again, to make sure they're utilizing the licenses appropriately. Okay. Again, that Active Directory is probably the most common one, but it's not the only directory service we support, and it's really great to help reduce the risk of users. And as also Steve said, when users leave the company, you want to be able to turn them off in one spot and not have to go and and go into each service individually and delete it. So from within one screen, their admin will have the ability to go maybe for this person here to go and maybe just delete the person. And doing that, it will unsubscribe them from all the services. Or maybe, as an admin, I've purchased 20 Salesforce licenses, and I need to go and dole those out. I could then assign those subscriptions off either individually users or from the subscriptions pane come over and assign subscriptions to multiple users at once. So whether you're dealing with users one at a time or services one at a time, you're going to have a nice workflow. It's going to make that very easy to deal with. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an admin in the store and I have access to all the functionality, but in enterprise, they're going to have many different roles. You're going to have just regular end users. You're going to have people who need financial accounting. You're going to have those who are maybe more in development and need more infrastructure and service functionality. And you can see down here in this screen, we have multiple roles, and really you could add any number of roles that you want and customize the privileges of those accordingly. So this really gives flexibility to the organization based on how they want to give privilege out to the users. There are over 100 different privileges that can be assigned out to those users, and based on their functional role, they'll be able to get the functions that they'll need. Okay. So role-based access control is important to do this and to do it individually for each company. You don't want to try to fit the same rules that one company has into another. So you let each company just define the old rules and privileges that they have there. I mentioned briefly a minute ago infrastructure as a service, and while I don't really have time to go into too much of a demo here, giving certain users the ability to go and spin up, to define different templates, to spin up templates. Maybe it's a WordPress, maybe it's some other 3-tier web app or a database in the cloud or in any of the clouds. Could be in your own VMware, could be out in Amazon, Web Services, Azure, SoftLayer, etc. Having the ability to do it all in the same console instead of having to do that in each of those services is another benefit that our platform provides. And this it was in phase 2 for that auto parts manufacturer. They're looking to roll this out as well. They've rolled this out as well. Okay. Now, I had showed you along the way, when I placed that order, I was able to pick a budget out of the list of 4. And that's great if, for the end user to be able to specify that, but then at the end, you need somebody in finance to come back and look at the budgets and see what's been used. And you maybe want the managers to be able to do this as well, to understand where their budgets are so they know what to budget for in the next quarter. And so you'll need something like this showback report. This is one example of what you can do. We have, the budget period, what's the code, the description, what was allocated, what was actually used in that period, etc. And so this budgeting functionality, both for the user and for the manager to come back in and either view them here or go and even define new budgets and update budgets as you go along, is important functionality. As also we had mentioned around governance, getting reports on how many licenses used of different types. Those are all things that should be available. We have a set of out-of-the-box reports that handle most needs, but these can be customized, and users can add customized reports to this list as well. Okay, so you can see that with the Jamcracker platform, Enterprise IT have the tools to offer different services, to manage the users and their roles, address budgeting and approval workflows, and report on that usage. What I'd like to do is switch gears and go back to the interface that you as a service provider would be seeing, and that's responsible for handling everything, right? It's all the back-end stuff, and creating those portals, creating the services, and this is the interface that you would be handling, and this could also be white labeled and put your logo in here. But one of the first things I'd like to show you is going under administration and looking at store management here. You'll see that this one demo instance that I'm running actually has about half a dozen, 6 or 7 stores in it. And you can manage each of those stores. So we call them stores. You could call them, in some cases, it's enterprise portals. But you might be selling services directly or through channels as well. So whether it's an enterprise you're selling to or resellers, all those types of storefronts and portals can be managed in the same instance. Here's an example of one. This is an example of an enterprise store that's tied in with Active Directory. Specify the URL for it, so there's a lot of flexibility in the URL. Give whatever host name you want there. Give the branding, so that's picking the logo that's going to appear in and the pages and the help pages and any emails. And then the color theme. You can pick different themes for the look and feel to help match the brand of the company. You then go and look at the regional settings. So a lot of these enterprises are global, so they're going to have maybe different languages. In this case, I only use English, but you can have other things like specifying different time zones. If they're global, they'll want their bills to be maybe in a certain time zone, and any timestamps to be in the time zone. And from a date format perspective, that again can be customized from a regional settings perspective, right? And then it comes to the policies. We call them store policies here. These are all the supporting pages in the portal. So there's privacy policy, security statement, analytics, banners, promotions, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility in what you're presenting to the clients, not just a catalog and some of the management screens, but all the stuff around it to support that, making sure that the business needs are satisfied. So as I had mentioned earlier, we can handle in a single platform both sort of reseller type stores or stores that are accepting credit card payments or purchase orders, as well as enterprise stores where it's really targeted and set up with terminology and functionality that really suits what an enterprise would need, including some budgeting functionality, right? And so if we look at then identity management, here's an example where at this store we've tied it in with an Active Directory server, so that all the users defined in Active Directory, which is where IT has been defining the users and wants to continue to define them, and define the users and their roles, that will all then get synchronized and passed down to the JamCracker portal, so users are automatically added and defined with the right groups and departments there. Okay, so that identity management is an important piece, I think, for enterprises that really helps simplify the user management. They also want to define the set of services you want to make available to that store. And here's an example. I've published most of them, but you can see some of them like antivirus down here, and this BUDR appliance, et cetera. Some of these databases and service offerings are not offered to that store. It's a matter of you being able to segment the services that you want to offer to your enterprise customer, as well as what the enterprise customer wants to see. Maybe they don't want to see all of these things, so you can show them only what they'll need to see. Okay. Now, as people go through and order those services, the end users are ordering and using services and all that, there are various notifications that can come through on that. Could be related to the orders, could be related to any billing items, etc. There's a lot of reporting capabilities and a lot of notification capabilities in the platform. And each of these notifications can be customized on a per portal basis so that users are getting the information they need to properly, to be notified appropriately for whatever function they're doing. Now, looking at the billing options here is an example. Just for an enterprise store, you're really just going to use like a pre-approved credit model where users are just going to be buying. They don't have to enter credit card information. But again, if you're trying to offer this to multiple tiers, maybe also to mid-sized and smaller businesses, you'll want to offer credit cards and be able to handle more of those retail transactions. And this single platform can handle that. In each store, you determine which way you want to handle that accordingly. And so, that's a little bit of the store setup. With the stores, you can define, what the catalog items are and how they're appearing in there, et cetera. You can, manage any of the orders. So there's a lot of functionality around handling that particular store and that client running in that store. Let's go back now and look at some of the services. So, of course, getting services into the catalog is one thing, and that's a whole other demo I could show you, but I just want to show you, really once they're in the catalog, what they look like and some of the options you had to choose from when you did get them on. So we go and pick, I don't know, maybe I'll pick this Salesforce item here, right? So Salesforce.com is a service in our catalog. Here's how we're presenting it out to the users. This is all, summary descriptions, more information, any requirements, FAQs, etc. We can do things like have an SLA and more of an end-user agreement that the user specifies. What category does it appear in is important, right? If you have a lot of services, maybe a bunch of categories, you want to categorize it appropriately. So that's all happening here on the Service Information tab. And then when you think about how that can be offered, maybe it's going to be offered to some customers on a monthly basis, some on an annual basis. Maybe you have different offerings. It's just you get a discount for buying it quarterly versus just monthly. And so you can have multiple offers in the system, and for each one of them, you can specify the different pricing options for that. So whether it's monthly, yearly, one-time charges, et cetera, you can have a combination of those. And then you look at the pricing, right? So as a service provider, you're going to need to track what you're paying to the vendors themselves, what you pay to Salesforce, what you pay to Box, et cetera, both on a recurring fee and the setup fee. You'll also want to be managing what that's being offered out to the stores as, or to those enterprise portals. So the wholesale price to that store would be $19 in this case with the minimum retail. Maybe the IT groups want to go and add their own markup to it, maybe take a few percentage points just because they're also going to support the service and their overhead for helping to get the users what they need. The stores themselves can actually add their own markup as well. And they do it per currency, as you see here. Our platform is globalized, handle multiple currencies as well, just like the taxation scheme for each of those, et cetera. Okay. And then under activities, in this screen here, it shows you another way of defining on a per service basis what store is this going to be offered to. So as you saw earlier, within a single store, I was able to show what the services are in the store. But here I'm able to say, from looking at it from the service perspective, what stores do I want to make this offered to as well. Okay. So I think that's shown quite a bit. Resources is another tab here. It gives you the ability to define additional information to the user, be it links to videos, attaching PDF files, etc. Any additional resources you want to include in the catalog item, those can be specified in here. From a billing standpoint and invoicing, there's functionality you need there. You need to be generating invoices to those clients on a regular basis. You need to handle those recurring subscriptions. You need to handle terminations appropriately. You need to make adjustments now and then for various things, processing payment, whether it's manually by more, check-based or ACH or various other methods. You need the infrastructure to go and manage that. And we've been doing this for 16 years now. We know how to do that, and our platform has been able to support the needs of all of our clients. And then, of course, the reporting capabilities, both at the store level I showed you, but from the marketplace level, from the service provider's view, you're really going to be needing reports on everything from what are the services-related activities, some of the histories of the orders, summaries, who's been logging in, who are the users, various views into the orders. All of this is important to run your business from a financial standpoint. Help make sure that you're offering the right services, that things are successfully driving revenue, and it's really it's a key part of the platform. And so with that, I think I've run out of time. Steve, I'd like to pass it back to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Bob, and Tony. If you could hand it back over, that would be great. Bob, take a few deep breaths, get your blood oxygen levels back up, because you covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time, and I want to thank you because, as you know, when we do these demos, it's at least an hour to a good hour and a half to do a deep dive. So I think you did a great job of hitting some of the high points here. And if any of you out there are interested in getting a more in-depth demo, please contact us. We'd be happy to spend more time with you. Bob can go through it in much more detail. But the net is we have a pretty good understanding of the space from a technology standpoint. We've been focused on this for a number of different years, and we have worked with a large number of different service provider partners such as yourselves. And so, again, be thinking about us. As promised, I said I would go through a couple case studies at the end to show how service providers are providing, these types of services to their enterprise customers. And so the first one I'll start with is CETA. You may not have heard of CETA, but CETA is a huge organization. They're owned and operated by and on behalf of 450 of the largest air transport companies out there. So that includes United Airlines, British Airways, FedEx, UPS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what historically they've done is they've been providing managed services. They operate data centers, shared services that are used by all of these different airline and air transport companies. So with CETA, when we first started engaging with CETA a couple of years ago, their objective was to expand their services offering to include cloud services, not only from the standpoint of being able to aggregate third-party cloud providers and offer them, under the existing billing relationship that they had with their all of their airline air transport customers, but also to take the basic principles of the cloud business model and apply that to how they deliver their core managed services as well, and really essentially provide a platform for rolling out new value-added services for their IT clients. So anyway, that's sort of the background on them. We talked about the business need. So in doing this, they needed to be able to support a wide range of different application services, infrastructure services. Keep in mind, they're catering to end users that are very technical developers within these airline customers, as well as users that are not so technical, more on the business side of things, more of the button-down application services users. So needed something to be able to accommodate different types of users, different types of services. That means different types of billing models, ranging from metered usage on infrastructure to subscription-based, tiered pricing on software as a service, be able to centralize as well as provide delegated administration. So in other words, enable the airline IT organizations to have control over the catalog services that CETA is providing, much as what Bob was just showing in the demonstration, and to be able to localize this. 450 airlines, this is not just U.S. And other English-speaking airlines. This is United Arab Emirates. This is Japan Airlines. This is a lot of other airlines operating out of different geographies, different regulatory environments, and certainly different currency and language requirements. So they needed something that could be globalized, that could be, essentially it required the multi-tenant, multi-tiered, architecture that we have. So, that's a quick overview of CETA. I could spend a lot more time talking about them, but I wanted to talk about one other example, and that is a service provider who is providing these types of cloud brokerage services on behalf of their federal government agency customer. And we have several different partners who are doing this for several different agencies. This is kind of a illustrative example of one of those. So in this case, this was a very large federal agency that was wanting to consolidate or unify how they're managing and consuming cloud services from different providers. And, naturally, governance, regulations, compatibility with different security requirements, for classified, unclassified, secret level data, we're all very much top of mind with this agency customer. And so all of the aspects that we talked about in terms of governance, reporting, auditing, things like that were extremely important. What was the key driver behind this? Why, why you wouldn't think of maybe the federal government as necessarily being kind of a leading edge adopter of cloud services and getting to the point where they needed a brokerage capability to scale up. This all goes back to when Obama first came in office, 7, 8 years ago, and you might recall that he hired the first ever in history CIO for the federal government, who was Vivek Kundra. And one of the policies that Vivek Kundra put in place was the so-called Cloud First policy. And what he said was that, hey, from this point on, any federal agency that comes to me as the FedGov CIO and says, hey, we need budget for building out this new capability, or we want to buy, this capability or build it out. You said, I'm going to require that in your, buy versus build analysis, that you have surveyed all the different cloud providers that are out there to see if there's anybody out there that can provide that or similar capability at a lower cost and without undue risk, right? And so it's essentially opened up the doors, the windows for different agencies to start getting up to speed on different cloud services. And over the course of 5-6 years of doing this, many agencies have reached the conclusion that in order to scale things up, in order to ensure that they are not taking on undue risk from a governance standpoint, from a spend management standpoint, from an operations standpoint, that they needed to work with a partner who could provide the resources, could provide the expertise, and provide the technology that would enable them to unify how they manage the delivery and provisioning, administration of users across all of the different services that they were consuming within the federal agency. So that's a quick review of that one. And finally, just to close, and unfortunately we're a bit over time. Don't have time for questions, so I'm going to we'll follow up with those of you that have asked questions. The one common one that I will answer very quickly is can we get a copy of the slides? And the answer is yes. If you ask for that in the Q&A, or if you send us an email to information@jamcracker.com, we can send you a copy of the slides. Very quickly, there's a lot of different considerations from a business model standpoint. Be happy to, again, if you want the slides and data behind this slide, be happy to provide that too. But keep in mind what we were talking earlier, the number one obstacle for enterprise IT organizations in terms of cloud adoption, the number one issue today is not security. It's not, it's not how do I plug it into this, it's how do I do this. It's how do I get access to the expertise and the resources? How can I come up to speed, or how can I work with partners who can provide that to me? And that's why we want to work with you. We think this is a great common opportunity. We thought through the technology. Service providers in general can provide the resources and the expertise. We'd love to work with you. And so as you're thinking through this type of business opportunity, please keep us in mind. And don't hesitate to reach out to us, even if you just want to kind of get some initial information, have some questions on what we've been talking about. We'd love to work with you. And so you can reach us at information@jamcracker.com. So with that, Tony, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Steve and Bob, for this insightful presentation. And thank you all for attending this webcast. As Steve indicated, if you would like a copy of the presentation, please email us at information@jamcracker.com. Again, that is information@jamcracker.com. And please check back with us next month for our next upcoming webcast. And thank you again for attending. Have a nice day.